Hello and welcome back to Bicyclelegs and another edition of Studio Albums Ranked. Today I'm going to be doing one of my favourite bands of all time, one of the first two bands I ever got into, and that is the mighty band from Akron, Ohio, the wonderful Devo. In fact, I think for this particular episode I'm going to need a slightly different change of headwear. That seems a bit better. Okay, now Devo were one of the first two bands I ever got into. For my 10th birthday, I got given a copy of Freedom of Choice as well as a copy of Corroboree by Split Enz. And Split Enz Studio Albums Ranked was the first proper video I did on this channel. So it's been a while getting around to Devo, simply because this one is going to be so hard for me to do because I love all of these albums. But for the purposes of this show, I do have to rank them. I do feel like my ranking is going to be a little bit different from a lot of other Devo fans. Again, my rankings are my personal preferences. These are my favorites. I'm not necessarily saying that they're the best Devo albums, because I think an argument can be made for a difference between best and favorite. But let's get into it. There are 9 studio albums in total, and the one I'm going to go with first as my number 9 is still an album I really like, and that is their album from 1990, and that is Smooth Noodle Maps. This was actually one of the very first albums I bought on CD. I didn't get the vinyl until later. That was the original release on vinyl that I showed you there. This is a much more recent re-release with a whole bunch of bonus tracks and what have you. Really nice with the die-cut sleeve. I was a little disappointed when this album first came out, but I have grown to love it over the years. There's some really good tracks on here. Stuck in a Loop is a great album opener. Postmodern Man's a good single. Morning Dew, their cover of Morning Dew, I really love. The Change Is Gonna Come, Big Picture. Pink Jazz Trances, my favorite song on this album. Love that song. Jimmy is just like wonderfully Devo and witty, and like Jimmy's in a wheelchair and I don't care. It's a good album. I just like the other albums better. My number 8 is going to actually be an album that I've already done a video on the channel. I did an In Defense Of on this album because I know that a lot of Devo fans really don't like this album, and that is Total Devo from 1988. It had been 4 years since a Devo album came out, and I was absolutely hanging out for this album when it came out. And so I was primed to really like this album, and I still do. It's not as good as their classic work, but I still think it's a really good album. And again, it got a recent reissue with a different cover, which is really cool, and it's got a bunch of bonus tracks of remixes and what have you, and a couple of unreleased tracks as well. But Baby Doll, a Disco Dancer. Disco Dancer is a great single, absolutely wonderful song. Some Things Never Change, Plain Truth, Happy Guy. Their cover of Don't Be Cruel is very funny. B-side maybe not quite as up to the rest of it, although you do get I'd Cry If You Died and Agitated. And on the cassette and CD version, and you do get it as a bonus track on this reissue, you get Sexy Love, which I always thought was great, and then Blow Up's a crack up. So I really like this album. If you want to know my thoughts on this album in more detail, I'll leave a link in the description to my In Defense Of Total Devo, so you can go and have a watch of that if you want to. My number 7. Now this is where it really gets hard because these albums I adore. all of them. And so ranking them was really, really difficult. But my number 7 is going to be their album from 1984, and that is Shout. Very much their Fairlight album. There's a lot of Fairlight in this album, and I think that does put a lot of people off. But I mean, you've got the title track Shout, you've got the Satisfied Mind, you've got Come On, you've got the Fourth Dimension, which is wonderful. You've got Here to Go, which the Go Mix version of that remix got released as a single and actually did reasonably well here in Australia. They always seem to do better in Australia, especially on the singles charts, than they did anywhere else. Which makes me proud as an Australian that we supported Devo. Yeah, there's a lot of really good songs on this album. I like the sound of the album, but I understand why some people don't like this one so much. But it's got a special place in my heart. My number 6 is going to be their comeback album from 2010, and that is Something for Everybody. This album is fantastic. Really great. They hadn't done a studio album in 20 years. They'd done the odd song for like soundtracks and that sort of thing. But they hadn't done a full album until 2010. They get together. They've got Josh Freese on drums now. And they just knock it out of the park as far as I'm concerned. This album is really, really good. Fresh. What We Do. Wonderful, wonderful song. Don't Shoot, I'm a Man. Really, really love that. Human Rocket is really good. Something is really good. Later Is Now, No Place Like Home, and March On. Yeah, there's a lot of really, really good stuff. This album is better than it had any right to be as far as I'm concerned, considering there was a 20-year gap between studio albums. I still go back and listen to this album a lot. Great album. Now we get into the top 5, which are the first 5 Devo albums. I think most Devo fans will concede that the first 5 albums are the cream of the crop as far as Devo is concerned. The way I've ranked them might rankle a few people's sensibilities, but again, these are favourites, not necessarily best. So I just need you to understand, these are my personal favourites. And I adore every single one of these albums. But my number 5 is going to be their album from 1980, Freedom of Choice. This is the album I got for my 10th birthday. So it'll always have a very special place in my heart. I mean, it's got Girl You Want, it's got Whip It, but it's also got It's Not Right and Snowball and Ton of Love. Freedom of Choice, the title track's probably the best song on the album. Either that or Gates of Steel. Oh, incredible stuff. Cold War. Don't You Know, That's Pep. Mr. B's Ballroom. Planet Earth. It's just a wonderful album top to bottom. I just don't listen to this one as much as I listen to the last 4. Maybe because I've been listening to it since I was 10 years old. I don't know. I still adore this album every time I listen to it though. It really, there's all of these albums that are coming up. There's not a weak track on any of them. And I don't know how many people you can say that their first 5 albums and there's not a stinker on the lot. Just absolutely incredible. Definitely a slightly more commercial sound on this one. Produced by the band in association with Robert Margouleff, who of course was part of Tonto's Expanding Head Band. They get a really great, it's a very clear, very simple sound on this album. And I think it works really well. And it's probably why a song like Whip It could actually break through into the mainstream. My number 4 is one that's really been rising in my personal estimations over the last 10 years or so. And it's an album I love a lot. It's their album from 1982, and that is Oh No, It's Devo. This is definitely their synth pop album. But the songs on here are just so strong. I remember when Peekaboo came out as a single and I just fell in love with it from the very first time I heard it. But it starts out with Time Out for Fun, which is such a good song. Out of Sync, really, really love that. Explosions is one of my favorites on this album. Really love it. That's Good with another really good single. Patterns, beautiful song. Really, really love it. And a great lyric too. And then my favorite song on the album, Big Mess. What a great song. Based on a letter that had been written into them by a guy who called himself Cowboy Kim, that somebody passed on to Devo, and they made a song out of it. Cowboy Kim was a strange guy, but this song doesn't make fun of him, it celebrates him. And I think that's wonderful. Speed Racer is a lot of fun. What I Must Do is a really good song, probably the weakest song on the album for mine. I Desire, based on some poetry written by John Hinckley, the guy who tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan because he was obsessed with Jodie Foster. They got in a lot of trouble for putting that song on the album, but it's a really good song. And then Deep Sleep, probably my second favorite song on the album. Just a wonderful, wonderful album closer. I love this album. I even wanted to put it a little bit higher, but I just... The top three albums had to be the top three albums. My number three is going to surprise some people because it's going to be a lot of people's number one, and I get that because it is an absolute classic album. It is their debut album from 1978, and that is Are We Not Men? We Are Devo. That's the US and North American cover. It was also the cover here in Australia. The European cover looked like that. I don't know why they had different covers in Europe for some of these albums that they did in the rest of the world, but I think it's because they're on a different label, because they're on Virgin in Europe and they're on Warner Brothers in the rest of the world, so that may have had something to do with it. But this album is just top to bottom incredible. I mean, when I first heard this album though, remember I was coming into them, you know, listening to the early 80s Devo. And when I first bought this album, it came as quite a shock because this is their punk album. And I wasn't really listening to punk music at the time. I was still a bit young for that. And it took me a bit to get used to this album, but once I did, I just realized the absolute brilliance of this album. I mean, you've got Uncontrollable Urge, probably their best album opener ever. You've got their incredible incendiary cover of Satisfaction. Praying Hands is wonderful. Space Junk. And then you've got Mongoloid and Jocko Homo to close out. I mean, two absolute classic songs that they still play in concert to this very day. I mean, it's not a Devo concert if they don't do Jocko Homo and Mongoloid. It really isn't. And then your B-side, you've got Too Much Paranoia, which is a short song at the beginning. Then you've got the incredible Gut Feeling, which just builds and builds and builds. And I think that got used in the movie The Life Aquatic. And Mark Mothersbaugh did a lot of soundtrack work with Wes Anderson over the years. So not a surprise there, I suppose. Come Back Johnny is a good single. Sloppy is like one of their earlier songs that they resurrected for this album. And then Shrivel Up. Just an incredible album closer. Really, really good song. I love this album so much. But I love the follow-up just a little bit better. So my number two is going to be their album from 1979, and that is Duty Now for the Future. And again, this is the North American Rest of the World cover for the Warner Brothers release. And this was there were variations on this, but this was the cover for the Virgin release in Europe. I love the flow of this album so much. You've got songs that actually predate a number of the songs that are on the debut album. They're even older songs. Instead of being from 1977 and 1978, they're from like 1976 or even earlier. Some people complain about the production on this album. I don't really have a problem with it. I particularly love Alan's drum sound on this album, actually. But it starts off with the Devo corporate anthem, which is just wonderful. Clock Out, what a great song. And then you've got the wonderful short instrumental Timing X going into Wiggly World, which is a great song. Blockhead, incredible song with some really, really complex, tricky time signatures in it. I think parts of it are in like 11/8 or 11/4 or something like that. It's just really strange and wonderful. Strange Pursuit is a later song that they're starting to really incorporate the synthesizers into the guitars. Same so with SIB, Swelling Itching Brain. Just a song that builds and builds and builds. And if you've ever had a migraine, this song is just it's just about a migraine, and it just sums it up so well. Then you've got the Rye, Triumph of the Will on side 2. The Day My Baby Gave Me a Surprise was the single off the album, and it's a really cool song. Pink Pussycat, one of the weirdest songs Devo ever did, I think. And I absolutely love it for that. Their cover of Secret Agent Man with a rare lead vocal from Bob One. Absolutely wonderful. Then you've got the all-time Devo classic, Smart Patrol, Mr. DNA, which might be a top 5 Devo song of all time for me. Incredible, incredible song. And then it closes off with Red Eye with a cameo vocal from Boogie Boy. Just top to bottom. I love this album so much. I think it's just a little stranger than the debut, and I think that's what really appeals to me about it. But my number one is the first album. It's not the first Devo album I owned. That was Freedom of Choice. I got given that for my 10th birthday. This was the first album I ever spent my own pocket money on. So it holds a special place in my heart for that reason. It's their album from 1981, and that is New Traditionalists. And again, this is the Warner Brothers cover for North America and the rest of the world. And this is the cover for the Virgin release in Europe. And I love the sound of this album. I love the darkness. There's a real darkness to this album, which just really, really appeals to me. And the songs, just incredible. Through Being Cool. What a sort of manifesto to say, yeah, we made it with Freedom of Choice, but now we're done with that. Jerking Back and Forth, fabulous song. Pity You, love it. Soft Things is a really, really great song. And then Going Under, my favorite song on this album, just incredible, dark. And recycles lyrics from like a very early song called All of Us. Just incredible stuff. And then on side 2, you've got Race of Doom, which is great. Love Without Anger, another one of my favorite Devo songs. Love Without Anger isn't love at all. I love it. The Super Thing is really, really epic and cool. Beautiful World, one of their best singles ever and one of their best film clips ever. Devo did such great film clips. They were absolute pioneers of the music video. And they should be recognised for that, as well as for their incredible contributions to music. And then Enough Said, great album closer and really, really pointed lyric. Absolutely love it. So that's my Devo ranking. Going back through it from top to bottom. At number 1, we have New Traditionalists. At number 2, Duty Now for the Future. At number 3, Are We Not Men? We Are Devo. At number 4, Oh No, It's Devo. At number 5, Freedom of Choice. At number 6, Something for Everybody. What a great comeback album that is. At number 7, Shout. At number 8, Total Devo. And at number 9, I still love this album, Smooth Noodle Maps. Now, as you will see, I haven't included any live albums, I haven't included any compilations, and I haven't included the hardcore Devo albums, which are compilations themselves, but they're compilations of like really early recording contract demos and unreleased songs, and they are the strangest Devo you will ever hear. Really quite bizarre stuff on some of those albums, but I absolutely love them. I just didn't feel like I could include them with the regular studio canon, but they are wonderful albums and well worth seeking out if you haven't listened to them. So that's my Devo ranking. I'd love to know in the comments what your Devo ranking is, where you agree with me, where you disagree with me. I always love seeing different lists of people's rankings, because it does make me sometimes reconsider how I listen to these albums. So please let me know in the comments how you would rank them, which ones are your favorites, which ones you don't like so much. Let me know why. Be wonderful. Please like, share and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed so far and watched a video and liked. You're doing me a wonderful favor by doing that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you can, please share this with any of your Devo friends. That would be wonderful too. If you are new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have a ton of studio albums ranked videos going through a whole different range of genres. So everything's playlisted, so you can go to the studio albums ranked playlist and see all the different bands that I've done studio albums ranked shows on. Or if you want to look at some of my anniversary album shows, there's a playlist for those. If you want to look at my reviews, there's a playlist for those. If you want to look at my In Defense Of, which I've done an In Defense Of Total Devo, there's a playlist for that, and so on and so on. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram and Twitter. On Instagram, I'm mostly posting the records I happen to be listening to at the time, as well as posting channel updates. On Twitter, I talk about anything and everything, but I am definitely trying to give that more of a music focus. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.